Hey, I wanted to talk a little bit today about data and juvenile-related statistics as it relates to interactions with SROs. And there's a lot of information out there that's being shared on a national level, but we probably should bring that down and talk a little bit about the local level and what we have experienced here. And so I'd like to highlight and kind of share that data and those numbers overall so that we all understand where we're at for this last year. As we drill down into this data, I know when lots of statistics are pushed out, often it can seem confusing or overwhelming to decipher everything. Please know that I'll do my very best to share the context of the information because there are so many nuances to it, to include the decisions that are made and why we do what we do, and that just can't be understood from looking at just a raw statistic alone. The information and data I'm about to go over was gathered from the published report at the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice, Department of Public Safety, and we have provided that website there for you. Also contained within that, they have pulled information, demographic information in the report, and that was taken from the Colorado Department of Education. So that will also be provided for you below on that website. In this report, it provides information for all schools that are a part of Poudre School District. You should know that there are 3 different law enforcement entities that work throughout Poudre School District. Those are Fort Collins Police Services, Larimer County Sheriff's Office, and Timnath Police Department. Fort Collins School Resource Officers provide service to 38 PSD schools. LCSO provides service to 10, and Timnath provides service to 2. During the 2018 and 2019 school year, the Colorado Department of Education listed the student population at PSD as 30,447 students. So we have a lot of students that attend those 50 schools. The resource officers assigned to those 50 schools took enforcement action on 251 incidents total. Of those 251 incidents, Fort Collins Police cited students for 219 of those offenses, and the Larimer County Sheriff's Office cited students for 32 offenses. So in terms of the overall percentage or number we took enforcement action on, of the 251 incidents out of 30,447 students, we cited at less than 1% of the student population. A lot of the current conversation centers around BIPOC or minority students and what our enforcement action looks like in those specific areas, so we want to make sure we talk about that as well. There were 97 total incidents with BIPOC or minority students charged. There were a total of 87 actual BIPOC or minority students charged because some were charged more than one time. That kind of leads to some of the nuanced parts of the discussion, which is what types of offenses are students charged with and why are they charged at all. Of the 251 incidents we took enforcement action on, they are further broken down into these categories. The Department of Public Safety website uses large buckets or categories to capture information, but there are several different laws that fit under each category. You will see categories highlighted in a few different colors. Those in red have victims attached to those particular crimes. The one in blue are felony crimes that tend to cause concern for community harm for the student population. And included in that particular bucket is distribution of drugs. The categories not highlighted, we have some discretion depending on the circumstances not to charge. While I understand the inclination at face value to say, let's let kids be kids and let's have the school sorted out, you can see through the data that there are things that are outside their expertise to handle, that are legally required to be reported, and things that need to be addressed as a whole for the safety of the entire school community. You will see the ones that are highlighted in red have victims attached to those specific crimes, as I said. Those victims and their families have rights through legislation, and we cannot usurp a victim's right to be a victim, and they have to be afforded a legal remedy. I would surmise that most parents would agree that if your kiddo were a victim of one of those crimes that were fairly significant, that you would probably want some legal intervention and that it's necessary and should take place. Again, as a reminder, the total number of incidents that we were involved and charged was less than 1% of the student population. As we come back to the question of how do things look in terms of citing BIPOC or minority students, we're going to turn our focus specifically to those percentages and numbers. As we continue to look further at the data, we need to peel back another layer, and we will do that by looking specifically at some schools. In an effort to meet the time constraints of the presentation, I will highlight just 4 schools, 2 high schools and 2 middle schools, but we will provide a breakdown of all the schools we took enforcement action at, so you can review that if you would like. As a reminder, all the data again came from the published report at the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice, and then the demographic information came from the Colorado Department of Education. As we work through this data, it's important to look at percentages, but it's equally important to look at the total number. The first one we're going to discuss is Rocky Mountain High School. We had the highest number of incidents that we took action on at this school, so it's really important for us to take a look at this data. Rocky has a student population of 2,035 students, and of those students, 26% are BIPOC or minority students. So that equates to 529 students that are BIPOC or minority. We took enforcement action on a total of 57 incidents at Rocky. Of the 57 total incidents, there were 13 total incidents with BIPOC or minority students charged. And there were only a total of 12 BIPOC or minority students charged because there was an instance where the same student was cited more than one time. So when you kind of break that data down, we cited BIPOC or minority students at a 23% for total incidents, or 22% when you account for the change based on the actual number of students. So the percentage of student population that are BIPOC or minority is 26%, 529 students at Rocky total, and we cited at 22%, which is a total of 12 students. As we shift and look at the next school, we'll look at Poudre High School, which according to the Colorado Department of Education has the largest percentage of BIPOC or minority students for a traditional high school in the district. Poudre High School has a total of 1,820 students, and of those, 34% are BIPOC or minority, which equates to 618 students. So 618 students out of 1,820 are BIPOC or minority. We took enforcement action on a total of 48 incidents at Poudre High School. Of the 48 total incidents, there were 17 total incidents with BIPOC or minority students charged. There were a total of 14 actual BIPOC or minority students charged because there was an instance where a couple of students were cited more than one time. So as we break that down, we cited BIPOC or minority students at a total of 36% based on the incidents, or at 30% when you account for the change based on the number of actual students. So the percentage of student population that are BIPOC or minority is 34%, or 618 students at Poudre High School, and we cited at 30%, which was a total of 14 students out of those 618. The next school we're going to take a look at is Lincoln Middle School, which according again to the Colorado Department of Education has the largest percentage of BIPOC or minority students for a middle school in Poudre School District. Lincoln Middle School has a total of 615 students, and of those students, 53% are BIPOC or minority. So that equates to 325 students out of 615 are BIPOC or minority. We took enforcement action on a total of 14 incidents at Lincoln Middle School. Of the 14 total, there were 10 total incidents with BIPOC or minority students charged. And there were a total of 8 actual BIPOC or minority students charged because there was an instance where a couple of students, again, were cited more than one time. We cited BIPOC or minority students at 72% based on the total number of incidents, or at 58% when you account for the change based on the actual number of students. So the percentage of student population that are BIPOC or minority is 53%, or 325 students at Lincoln, and we cited at 58%, which was a total of 8 students that were BIPOC or minority. The final school we're going to talk about is Lesher Middle School. And again, according to the Colorado Department of Education, this school has the second largest percentage of BIPOC or minority students for a middle school in Poudre School District. Lesher Middle School has a total of 771 students, and of those students, 40%, or 308 students, are BIPOC or minority. We took enforcement action on a total of 6 incidents that year at Lesher Middle School. Of the 6 total, there were 4 total incidents with BIPOC or minority students charged. And the actual number was 4 BIPOC or minority students charged with no percentage of change. We cited BIPOC or minority students at 67% based on the total incidents and students. So the percentage of student population that are BIPOC or minority is 40%, or 308 students that are BIPOC or minority. And we cited at 67%, or cited a total of 4 students out of those 308. From those offenses cited, we can further break it down. People often want to know, what does that look like if a student gets charged? So I want to kind of share some high-level overview of that process, but we have some special guests from the juvenile diversion teams that are going to share more detail on that process. If we took enforcement action, most often that process begins with the juvenile team at the district attorney's office reviewing the case for collateral information or victim or community impact statements and any other history to make decisions. So cases being considered for diversion are kept pending, which means charges are not actually filed onto a juvenile's record. They are screened with the diversion staff, who helps to create a plan of action to help them repair any harm done, learn from their offense, and gain additional coping skills. For the 2018-2019 data, over 50% of the 219 incidents that Fort Collins took enforcement action on went to some sort of diversion process. And those specific numbers below, 53% went to diversion, 9% went to municipal court or traffic tickets. Those were from the traffic incidents that we had. 36% went to regular court. That's typically done because of the type of offense that it is, or some previous history that maybe that student has had, which doesn't make them necessarily eligible for the diversion program, according to the DA's office. And then we had 2% that were considered a no-file, and that happens for various reasons. So once it's gone through that process, once a plan is identified, the student is referred then to many local specialized providers to get additional services. This is utilized kind of as an interrupter of behavior so that we can get supports in place and really just try and reach out and support that student as best as possible. This leads me kind of to the final piece of information that we wanted to talk about, which is SRO's role in discipline at schools. And I think at times the term has created some confusion because everyone has their own definition they place on discipline, especially if it hasn't really been defined for you. The definition I'm talking about today for discipline is about in-school or out-of-school suspension or expulsions. Please know that the SRO program has no say and do not give input on those issues. In fact, that is all dealt with by the administrative team at each school that makes those determinations and those decisions. For the sake of clarity, though, I wanted to kind of explain that SROs do provide adult oversight, like all other adults that are in the school buildings, to help stop unruly behavior or to have conversations with kids on how decisions they are making might lead to bigger issues. These conversations are done in an effort not to have to write a ticket for an incident and to handle an issue at the lowest possible level. So this is really just a verbal reminder, like most parents and adults give to kids, to stop an action before it gets out of hand. I hope that provides a little bit of clarity on that, because I know there's been some questions about it. And I think at this point, that kind of led us through the SRO enforcement data portion, with more insight being provided upcoming next from our guest speakers.